Washington bureau chief Jerry Seib writes in the Wall Street Journal today, it may seem an odd thing to say on the verge of the fourth Republican presidential debate, but the fight for the Republican nomination has never felt more unsettled. Gerald Seib is also one of the moderators of the 7 p.m. undercard debate. He joins us now live from Milwaukee. So Donald Trump has been, at or near the top of the polls for a month now, or maybe a little more than that. But you say this thing is far from over, very unsettled. How?
Well, look, I think one useful perspective here is to remember that in 2008, Rudolph Giuliani led the Republican field through most of the preceding year, 2007, for 8 or 9 months straight. And then he disappeared rapidly when it got closer to voting. So this is, first of all, just in general, a time in which stability on the surface is probably not stability in reality. I think the second reality is that Ben Carson and Donald Trump, the two front runners, while they've benefited from outsider status, are so unorthodox in their candidacies that, you can't be sure that will really hold. Donald Trump arouses a lot of negative feelings among a lot of voters, including a fairly hefty number of Republican voters. And Ben Carson does not have a fully formed, policy plan. There's not a lot of substance there yet. Maybe those are fatal flaws. Maybe they're not. But I do think you have beneath them some people who look like they may be finally about to rise. You mentioned Marco Rubio in the lead-in. Ted Cruz is there if people tire of Donald Trump and Ben Carson in the outsider lane. And I do think Jeb Bush ultimately is going to have a moment somewhere along the line. Maybe tonight is that moment. He's too powerful to just simply fade away, I think. And then finally, Chris Christie, who's in the undercard debate that I'm going to be moderating tonight, has found his voice over the last couple of weeks. He's found a couple of issues that work for him. He's rising in New Hampshire. That's not reflected nationally yet. But he has a chance to stand out tonight, and that could change things as well. So it feels unsettled rather than stable. Back to the front runners in just a moment. But you mentioned something regarding Jeb Bush and his performance tonight that somewhat echoes what Charles Krauthammer had to say on Special Report. I want to play that for you and get your reaction.
I think in the end, this debate is all about one thing, Jeb Bush. He's had 3 bad debates, one more, and he's not going to drop out of the race, but he'll really be dead man walking. He's got to show a spark, and that means a moment. Look, the entire season has become sort of theatrical. The ones who've risen are the ones who've had the moments.
What about that? Theatrical? Is that what is driving this candidate season?
Well, it sort of is up to this point, but I also don't think Jeb Bush does theatrical particularly well. And I'm not sure it needs to be a moment. I think it just needs to be a performance that people remember. But I do think the cards are right for Jeb Bush. This is going to be a substantive debate. There's going to be a focus on economics. He's got a fully formed economic plan. It's right in the mainstream of where Republican voters tend to be on economic and tax issues. It should play to his strengths. He can describe it. He understands it. Will he do it well? Will he get a chance to do it well? I think in the latter, he will get a chance to do it well. So I don't know that he needs a moment, but he does need a performance. He needs to stand out correctly for the first time in 4 debates.
And when you talk about Donald Trump, 29% of voters, or 29% of Republican voters, have negative feelings about him. I think 56% of voters overall. If that's the case, why is Donald Trump sitting there, in the pole position on stage?
Well, I think because he has tapped into the prevailing sentiment, which is, disgust with Washington, anger at the establishment, lack of confidence in established figures. He's a very decidedly non-establishment candidate. And he's basically decided that the way to succeed is to cut through the static by saying, I'm going to go do tough things. I'm going to succeed. We're going to knock things down and remake them. He's not being very specific about what that means. But at this moment, that seems not to have been the primary thing that voters are looking for. What I'm suggesting in the column that we're talking about here is that maybe that's about to change. You get to November and December, January before the February 1st Iowa caucuses, then voters are done making statements. They have to make choices, and maybe that'll be a different dynamic.
You'll have, speaking of dynamics, you'll have 8 candidates on stage for the big debate as opposed to 10 or 11. You'll have 4 candidates, I believe, in the undercard. Is that going to allow more substance, more time for thoughtful answers, and perhaps give Americans a better feel for who these candidates really are?
Yeah, I think yes. I think the short answer to your question is yes. I think there are going to be fewer candidates on the stage for the main debate. And in the undercard debate, I think you have 4 very serious substantive candidates, and they're going to be given a little more time under the rules of these debates to actually give an answer to a question. So you're going to have, hopefully, and I think by design, you should have a little more serious policy discussion, which hopefully leads to a little more serious policy debate as opposed to debate about style or extreme statements. A real debate about substance rather than performance would be a good thing, I think.
Okay, so you're the moderator tonight for the first debate. Are you nervous?
You got to be a little nervous going into these things. But, in the end, this should not be about the moderators. This should be about the candidates. And if we can manage to make that be the case, I think we'll all come out ahead.
Great answer. Jerry Seib, the Washington Bureau's chief for the Wall Street Journal. Jerry, we'll be watching tonight.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Don't forget, you can catch that Republican presidential debate tonight on the Fox Business Network live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. First one, Jerry Seib co-moderating, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, followed by the main event at 9 p.m., all with expert analysis from the Fox Business Network and the Wall Street Journal. If you want to find the Fox Business Network in your area, go to www.foxbusiness.com/channel finders.